Hi kiddos, welcome to our read aloud. I'm going to switch things up a little bit today. It has been Poetry Month for the month of April, and I hope that many of you have had a chance to work on this poetry packet that I sent to all of you in, I think, the middle of April, maybe around Easter break. And if you haven't finished it yet, no worries. You can. Hi, Addie. She always likes to say hi to you guys. She was riding her bike. She just ate lunch with her helmet on. Okay, so if you haven't finished this yet and you're still working on it, no worries. Keep working. Take your time. Remember, when Mrs. Terranova assigns things in Google Classroom, always take your time with them. Nothing's ever due on a certain time. Always just take your time, turn it in whenever you can. Um, Everything's stress-free, okay? Take a deep breath, do a nice job, and no worries. So if this is not finished yet, keep on working, have fun with it, and turn it in when you can. But since it was Poetry Month in April, there was all different kinds of poems you could have worked on. They gave you examples at the top, and then you were able to create your own poems underneath. And today, I'm going to give you a little read aloud of what tomorrow is going to be. Tomorrow is National Keep a Poem in Your Pocket Day. And I'm going to do this story for you so that you know a little background knowledge on what this day is all about. And I was hoping you could come back and celebrate this day with me and celebrate it with me in one of our Google Meets. I will schedule a time and send a link. Actually, our link will be right on Google Classroom. And I will schedule a time for tomorrow for you to come back and share a poem with me. So you could even find a poem that you love already. Some of you probably have lots of books at home, or one or two books at home that might have poetry in them, and you can pick a poem that you love and share it with us. Hi, Andrew. And or you can choose a poem out of here that you've written that you've come to love also. But first, let's take a look at this story. It's called A Poem in Your Pocket, written by Margaret McNamara and illustrated by Brian Karras. Mr. Tiffin and the students from How Many Seeds in a Pumpkin and the Apple Orchard riddle are back. Eleanor always gets the best grades, so she and her classmates are sure she'll write the best poem to read aloud on Poem in Your Pocket Day. And this year, a real live poet is coming for a visit. All through April, Mr. Tiffin's students read poetry books and learn poems by heart. When it's time to write poems of their own, everyone jumps right in. Everyone except Eleanor. Eleanor wants the poem she writes to be absolutely perfect. And if it's not perfect, she doesn't want to write anything at all. Join Mr. Tiffin's class as they learn about poetry, from metaphors and similes to haiku and acrostics, and cheer Eleanor on as she lets go of being perfect so she can start being creative. A poem in your pocket. Miss Crane is coming to visit for Poem in Your Pocket Day, said Mr. Tiffin. We're going to write poems of our own and put them in our pockets. I'm going to wear my jeans with 6 pockets that day, Eleanor whispered to Molly. I'm going to have a different poem in each one. I'm sure your poems will be perfect, Molly whispered back. Eleanor thought it would be too show-offy to agree, so she didn't say a word, but instead, she nodded. Eleanor got to work. All during March, she studied poetry. All during April, the class caught up with Eleanor. They read poetry books and learned poems by heart and wrote poems in their poetry journals. Every day there was something new to learn. Mr. Tiffin taught them about similes, and they tried them out. Robert is as tall as that really high building in the middle of town, said Robert. Math is like a knot, said Tara. One that we can untangle together, said Mr. Tiffin. A simile compares two different things using like or as. They worked on metaphors. A metaphor is a comparison saying one thing is another. Recess is an ice cream cone on a hot day, said Alex, even in April. Homework is a belt that's too tight, said Jake. Do you have a metaphor, Eleanor? Asked Mr. Tiffin. I'm coming up with something amazing, said Eleanor. I'm just not ready to say anything. Eleanor is a library, said Tara, filled with silence. The class read short poems. These are called haiku, said Eleanor. Little poems can say a lot, said Charlie. They read puzzle poems. These are called acrostics, said Eleanor. They're fun to figure out, said Jeremy. They read poems that looked like pictures. These are called concrete poems, said Eleanor. A concrete pumpkin seed, said Kimmy. And they read a whole lot of funny poems. Hey, who knew poems could make you laugh, said Jake. I don't know the name for these, said Eleanor. Whew, said Molly. Here's a haiku by Jeremy. No more gray days with a poem in my pocket, bright secret rainbow. Acrostic. This is by everybody. It spells Tiffin down the side. Teacher, interested, friendly, fun, impressive, nice. This is a concrete by Charlie. It's in the shape of a picture. There is only one way to find out how many seeds are in a pumpkin. Count, 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 count. I like concrete poems. They're fun. And this is called Funny Mom's Complaint by Jake. We're out of apples. Kids again. Don't eat so many, please. They're costing me a lot of dough. You think they grow on trees? One bright morning, Mr. Tiffin took the class outside. What do you see? He asked. Use your poet's eyes. Everyone looked around. Buds are like tiny red firecrackers, said Charlie, waiting to explode into flowers. Sadness is a cracked sidewalk, said Tara. Very nice, said Mr. Tiffin. Miss Crane will be so impressed. He noticed that Eleanor was being very quiet. How about you, Eleanor? What does your poet's eye see? Eleanor wanted Miss Crane to be impressed with her, too. I'm still thinking, she said. Eleanor looks a little sad. One Friday afternoon, Mr. Tiffin brought everyone in class a small brown bag with a surprise inside. Sneak a peek inside your bags and then write a poem about what's in there. But don't tell anyone what you're writing about, he said. We'll do our best to guess." The class took out their poetry journals and got to work. Then they read their poems out loud. Alex guessed that Jake had a pebble in his bag, and she was right. Kimmy guessed that Molly had a glass animal, and she was right. She could even tell that it was a horse. No one could guess what Eleanor had in her brown bag. Her journal page was clean and blank. "This shell is too perfect to write about," she said. "Try again at home tonight," said Mr. Tiffin. "And remember, poetry is a messy business." On Saturday night, Eleanor tried to finish her brown bag poem. She wrote 7 drafts and she only liked 1. When she woke up in the morning, she read the poem she liked. "This stinks," she said. On Sunday night, Eleanor wrote 6 haiku with a total of 3 metaphors and 2 similes. She smiled as she went to bed. In the morning, she looked them over. "These are not poetry," she said. By Monday night, Eleanor was worried. She wrote 11 rhyming poems. The next morning, she threw them off her desk. "Today is Poem in Your Pocket Day," she said, "and I don't have anything that's good enough." Eleanor's eyes stung as she got ready for school. She wore a dress with just one small pocket, with nothing inside it. The day was as gray as Eleanor's mood. The whole school was decorated for Poem in Your Pocket Day. There were pockets on doors and poems in those pockets. There were pockets on the lockers and poems stuffed in those. There were rolled up poems and stapled poems. There was a poem written in chalk on the sidewalk, but that one had run in the rain. All the students had poems in their pockets, all except one. Eleanor worked on her poem at recess. She worked on her poem in the girls' room. She even worked on her poem during science, but the more she worked, the harder it was to think. At the end of the day, the students gathered in the gym for the poetry assembly. Mr. Tiffin told the school that Emmy Crane was a great American poet. He led her to the stage and she sat down in the author's chair. "She looks like a queen," said Molly. "She looks perfect," said Eleanor. Emmy Crane read some of her poems aloud. She told the students what it was like to be a writer and answered their questions. "Do you make a lot of money?" asked Robert. "Just enough," said Emmy Crane. "Where do you get your ideas?" asked Charlie. "From everything I think and everything I feel," said Emmy Crane. At last it was time for Mr. Tiffin's class to read their poems. Eleanor could hardly breathe as her classmates went up onto the stage and pulled their poems out of their pockets. Charlie recited his poem. Emmy Crane grinned. Robert shouted his poem. Emmy Crane winked. Tara whispered her poem. Emmy Crane nodded. Finally, it was Eleanor's turn. She looked at Mr. Tiffin. "Would you rather not read your poem?" he asked. Eleanor could not even speak. "I wanted my poem to be perfect," she said to Mr. Tiffin, "but I have nothing in my pocket. Nothing at all." "You don't have to go up there," said Mr. Tiffin. "I can't disappoint Emmy Crane," said Eleanor. Eleanor walked slowly up onto the stage. She looked out at all the students and all the teachers and at Emmy Crane herself. "My name is Eleanor," she said in a tiny voice, "and I don't have a poem in my pocket." I tried and tried, but I couldn't get it right. Come over here, Eleanor. Emmy Crane smiled a small smile as Eleanor walked closer. No poem is perfect, she said, in a voice only Eleanor could hear. I thought of so many things, Eleanor told Emmy Crane, but they're all in my head. Tell me what you've been thinking about, Eleanor, said Emmy Crane. Eleanor closed her eyes and thought about the poems she wanted to write. I have a poem, she said, in the pocket of my mind. She remembered the poetry book she had studied at the library. It is neat and perfect there. She used her poet's eye, as delicate as a shell and as sturdy. She thought about the treasure in her brown bag. It has mysteries inside it. Then she thought about her blank journal page. But when I try to write it down, the words disappear. She pictured the poem on the sidewalk that morning, like chalk on the sidewalk in the rain. Then she opened her eyes. At last, Emmy Crane spoke. That's a poem itself, she said to Eleanor. Those are words from the heart, and words from the heart are where poetry begins. Eleanor stepped down from the stage. The assembly was over. Everybody clapped and cheered for Emmy Crane. Eleanor was feeling too much to cheer, so she cheered inside, as loud as she could. So, boys and girls, at the end of this, it has Eleanor's poetry page. And I want to just read it to you because tomorrow I'm asking that everybody bring a poem that they love or a favorite poem. And again, you can maybe have one out of a book that you have at home. You can research one online and read some over, and maybe one strikes you as one you love. You can take one out of your poetry packet that maybe you've written yourself, or like Eleanor, you can have something that has just come to your mind, and it doesn't have to be a poem because poetry doesn't have to rhyme. Poems can come to you at any time. Follow your ideas wherever they may wind. Keep a poem in the pocket of your mind. So on Google Classroom, I have uploaded 2 sheets, little activities for you to think about for the poem that you choose. And then there's even a little pocket that you can create to keep your poem inside. If you find a poem, great. I'd love for you to join us tomorrow. I'll email the link, the time and the link for our Google meeting, and you can bring that poem to share with us. You can keep it in your pocket, and it's National Keep a Poem in Your Pocket Day. So the fun of that is to share your poem. Share it with mom, dad, call grandma, grandpa, aunts, uncles. If you take a walk and you see somebody, share that poem with your neighbors or people that you might see and you know as you're taking a walk. And it's National Poetry Month for April, and this is how we're going to close out our Poetry Month. So hopefully you can join us tomorrow. And if you don't have a poem to share, you are welcome to just come, hang out, listen to the poems, and share something that maybe you've been working on or something special to you tomorrow, okay? So I hope you enjoyed our Poem in Your Pocket read aloud. Hopefully it gave you some ideas, some thoughts about maybe what you could do for tomorrow and what you can share to celebrate this day with us. So thanks for joining me. See you tomorrow. Bye.